Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm Sam and welcome to my channel. It is so nice to see you. This week I have 3 delicious pumpkin dessert recipes that you are going to love. So let's get to baking. All right, you guys, we're going to start this week out with making a delicious single layer pumpkin cake with a cream cheese frosting. This is so good. I make it almost every year for either our Thanksgiving Day table or the Christmas Day table. It's so good. So we're going to start out with the dry ingredients. So I've just got some regular all-purpose flour here that I just spilt all in the oil, but it's okay. It'll mix in together, I promise. We're off to a good start today. I'm always making a mess in the kitchen. So I've got my oven preheated to 350 degrees. I've got a 9 by 13 inch baking pan greased and lined, ready to go. So to my flour, I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. I'm going to add a half of a teaspoon of ginger. This cake has really good flavor, really good flavor. I'm going to add in a 1/4 teaspoon of clove. And I'm going to grate in some nutmeg. If you don't have a whole nutmeg, just do about 1/8 of a teaspoon to 1/4 of a teaspoon of nutmeg. That should be good. Smells good already. So I'm just going to add a little bit of salt, probably about 1/2 of a teaspoon. I'm using kosher salt. If you're doing fine salt, I would do about 1/4 of a teaspoon because you don't want it to be too salty. Give that a little mix. Smells good already. So now I'm just going to add in some baking soda, about a teaspoon. And some baking powder. This is going to help it rise nicely. And make sure that baking powder and baking sugar is well mixed in that flour, because I have done that before and it's horrible to bite into a clump of baking soda. Okay, that's all nice and well mixed. I'm going to set this to the side and get my other bowl for the wet ingredients. Okay, for the wet ingredients, I'm going to add about 3/4 of a cup of packed brown sugar, and this is going to give it that nice molassesy flavor that we all know and love in all things pumpkin. And we're going to do 2/3 of a cup of regular sugar, and I'm using cane sugar, but you can use whatever kind you have on hand. I just like the flavor of it better. Plus, it's a little bit less processed than white cane sugar. But anyways, use what you got on hand. So I'm just going to break these two up and get them kind of mixed together a little bit. Okay. And now we're going to add in our pumpkin puree. Make sure you get 100% pumpkin and not the pumpkin pie filling, because the pumpkin pie filling already has the seasonings in it. We just want the pure pumpkin. So I'm going to add that right in there. One whole can. And I'm going to add 2 eggs. Just make sure they're at room temperature, because they will mix in a little bit better than if they're cold. And I'm going to add in my flour flavored oil here that I dumped a little bit of oil into, but that's fine. It'll all get mixed in together. And then we're just going to mix this together until it's well combined. Don't forget your vanilla. Add about a teaspoon. You can do 2 teaspoons up to a tablespoon, however much you want. Just add that in there. Now we can mix it all together. Okay, I've got that mixed together, but before I add this into my dry ingredients, I'm just going to clean up a little bit, just so I have a little bit more room to work. So I will be right back. Okay, so I cleaned up a little bit. I've still got my flour sugars here. That's fine. I'm going to need those later. So I'm just going to add all of my wet ingredients into my dry ingredients and then just mix this until it's just combined. You don't want to mix it too much, just until all of the dry ingredients are absorbed into the wet ingredients. So that way you get a soft cake. You don't want to do this in 2 separate bowls. This can be done in one bowl if you want to save on dishes, which I do quite a lot around the holidays. Okay, that is all nice and combined. So now I'm just going to grab my baking dish. See, I've just got it greased, lined with a little bit of parchment. This is just going to help me get it out later when I remove it from the pan to a cooling wire rack to cool. So we're just going to plop all of this down into this dish, this baking dish. Make sure you get out all of that yumminess. This is one of the things that I look forward to the most during the holidays, is baking delicious desserts. I mean, I love cooking in general and cooking for the family, which I do every year. But I think cooking desserts is my favorite. Okay. Now we're just going to spread this out evenly. And then we are going to put this in the oven for about 20 to 25 minutes. Depending on how hot your oven cooks, it might take a little bit longer. So when a toothpick insert it into the center of the cake, if it comes out clean or just a few crumbs, then you're good to go. My hands are clean, so I'm just going to scrape this off right in there because I want all of that delicious pie in there, or cake, not pie. Okay, so I'm going to give my hands a quick rinse. Pop this in the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes, give or take a few, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it gets done. Okay, so I just took this out of the oven and it is cooked completely through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this sit here for about 15 to 20 minutes and cool completely. This is what it looks like. It looks so good. Smells even better. So like I said, I'm going to leave this here for about 15 minutes or so, let it cool down slightly, and then I'm just going to transfer it to my wire rack to let it cool completely. Once it's cool, we will come back and make the frosting and get this beautiful cake frosted. Okay, so I've got my cake. It's cooled. It's sitting over to the side. And now we're going to make some delicious frosting to go on top. So in my bowl here, I've just got a package of cream cheese that's at room temperature and about 4 tablespoons of butter. And I'm just going to blend this together until it's smooth and creamy. Okay, so I've got some powdered sugar here. I've got about 2 cups. It might take a little bit more, might take a little bit less. Just depends. It's sifted. So I'm just going to add about a cup or so of this into my bowl here. I don't want to add too much because then it'll just go flying everywhere, and we want it in the frosting and not on me. So I'm just going to add all of this into here a little bit at a time, and I'm just going to blend it until it's creamy and fluffy. Okay, now that I've got this all mixed together, I'm going to add about a teaspoon of salt, more like a half a teaspoon. We don't want it too salty. And then I'm going to add probably a teaspoon of vanilla. And I'm just going to mix this together until everything is well combined and it's thick and fluffy and ready to frost a cake. Okay, so I've got my cake here and it's cooled completely. It looks absolutely delicious. So I'm just going to add some of this frosting right on top, and then we'll kind of smooth it out. And it's going to be absolutely delicious. I've got my little offset spatula here. And we're just going to make some swoops on top, going all the way to the edge, making it look nice and pretty. And that's what it looks like. Looks absolutely delicious. Now this is ready to serve, but you can keep this covered in the refrigerator for about a week. All right, you guys, here is this wonderful pumpkin cake with cream cheese frosting. I just sprinkled over some extra cinnamon on top for decoration. And you guys, this cake is so good. All right, you guys, moving on to the next delicious dessert. We're going to make pumpkin whoopie pies. These are absolutely delicious. You can make a big batch and they freeze really well. So we're going to start out with our dry ingredients. We're going to need some flour. And I sift mine and then put it in my little bucket here. Just makes it easier later on when I need some, so I don't have to sift it. Okay, I've got 3 cups of flour in there. And now we're going to add in all of our spices. So we're going to need some cinnamon, about a tablespoon. We're going to need a teaspoon of baking powder. This is going to help it rise. And we're going to need some baking soda. About a teaspoon. It's going to help it get nice and soft and fluffy. We're going to need some ginger. Again, about a teaspoon. And a teaspoon of salt. I'm using kosher salt. So if you're using fine salt, I would do a half of a teaspoon. And then you're going to need some allspice. And this is going to give it a nice depth of flavor. And you're going to need some cloves. I love cloves in allspice cakes, pumpkin spice cakes. It's just really delicious. Now that we have all of that in there, we're going to mix this really well, making sure that baking powder and baking soda is really mixed into that flour and spice mixture. You don't want any clumps of that in there. It's got a really bitter flavor to it. All right, that is all nice and combined. I'm going to set this aside and we're going to grab another bowl for our wet ingredients. All right, for our wet ingredients, we're going to get about 2 cups of packed brown sugar. This is a half cup measure. So we're going to need about 4 of these. And we're going to need a stick of butter. This is room temperature butter. I've just had it set out pretty much all day so it's nice and soft. We're going to plop that right in there. And now I'm just going to take a little spatula here and I'm just going to mix this together really well. It'll take a minute or 2 for it to come together. It doesn't have to be completely mixed because it's going to get mixed anyway. But try to get all of that brown sugar kind of mixed in with that butter. That is as good as it's going to get right now. You can do this with a handheld mixer. I just find it goes everywhere when you try to mix it, but it's fine. Now that I have that in there, we're going to add the rest of our ingredients. I've got some oil. I've got some 100% pure pumpkin. You don't want to use the pumpkin pie filling. You want to use the 100% pure pumpkin. And I've got 2 eggs. And now we're just going to mix this together really, really well. Make sure it's all nice and combined. And then we will add this to our dry ingredients. Okay, so I've got that all mixed together. I'm going to kind of scrape this down, make sure it's all combined. Okay, so I'm going to let this sit for just a second while I clean up a little bit, just so I have a little bit more room to work. My cabinets are very, very small in here, and I don't have a lot of space. So we're going to clean this up a little bit. Okay, so I've got everything cleaned up, got a little bit more room to work. I'm going to go ahead and add in the wet mixture into the dry ingredients and get this all mixed up. This smells so good. I love the smell of spices like cinnamon and cloves and nutmeg. It just smells so delicious and warming. All right, so we've got that in there, and now we're just going to mix this together until it comes together and forms a really thick batter. And then we will get this into a piping bag. If you don't have a piping bag, you can do a Ziploc bag with the corner snipped off, which that's what I'm going to do. I have mine right here, just a little Ziploc bag, and I got a round tip on the end, but you can do just the Ziploc bag with the corner snipped off. That will work just fine. So I'm just going to get this all mixed together and get it in the bag, and then we will get these piped out onto the cookie sheet, which I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees. And I have 2 sheet trays lined with parchment. So when we bake them, they will release easily from the sheet pan. And I'm going to grab my sheet trays here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of get this smushed down to the end as best as I can get it. Okay, and now all I'm going to do is pipe 2-inch circles onto each of these sheet trays, about 2 inches apart. All right, so I've got these done, and you want to make sure that you pipe out an even amount so you have a top and a bottom to the whoopie pies. So I'm going to put these in the oven for about 15 minutes, just until they are cooked through. I'm going to remove them, let them cool on the pan for about 5 minutes, transfer them to a wire rack to cool completely, and then we'll make the frosting and get these filled and put together. Okay, you guys, we are ready to make the filling for the whoopie pies. I've got 1 batch of cookies here that I've already kind of matched up to the other cookie, so that way they're roughly the same size when we put them together. So I'm just going to set those there and they can hang out. In the meantime, we're going to make the filling. So in here I've got a package of cream cheese and a stick of butter, and we're going to blend this together until it's nice and creamy. Okay, that is all nice and combined. And to this, I'm going to add just about a pinch or so of salt. And that's just going to help bring out those sweet flavors. And I'm also going to add in a teaspoon of honey. It's a little solidified, but it's fine. It will melt down once we get it going in the blender. And we're going to add about 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And again, we're just going to blend this together until everything's nice and combined. All right, and to this, we're going to add some powdered sugar. I'm going to add a cup of powdered sugar now and get that blended together. And then we will add in another cup of powdered sugar. So I've got the cup of powdered sugar, in there. So now we're just going to blend this in, add the other cup of sugar, and kind of go from there. We want it thick but spreadable. Okay guys, so I've got this blended up and it's pretty thick, but it's a little warm in here. So what I'm going to do is I've got this bag, or this is a piping bag, and I just fitted it with a star-shaped tip because my round tip is dirty. I'm just going to add a little bit of this frosting in here. I'm going to pop it in the refrigerator just for it to set up just a little bit, because it is slightly warm in here, and I want this to be a little bit more on the cool side. All right, you guys, so I've got my filling here. It's ready to go. I'm going to take one of these cookies, and I'm going to take the bottom side, and I'm just going to pipe some of this frosting into the center here. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to squish out when you add the other cookie. So I've got that. I'm going to add the other cookie on top, give it a little press, and that is a delicious whoopie pie. So I'm going to go ahead and finish all of the rest of these, and then I will show you what they look like when they're all done. All right, guys, so I've got them all filled, and this is what they look like. Now, I just put these in the freezer for about 30 minutes just to flash freeze them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap these all individually and keep these in the freezer. They thaw beautifully, so they will keep in the freezer for a long, long time. So that is what I'm going to do with these. There is absolutely no way that I can eat all of these, or my family can eat all of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to individually wrap these, pop them in the freezer, and then tomorrow I'm going to give half of these and half of the cake to some neighbors so that they can enjoy these as well, because there's absolutely no way we can eat all of these. So, all right, you guys, we are going to end this video off with some pumpkin bread with cranberries. This bread is so good and it's so pretty. It is perfect for either Thanksgiving Day table or your Christmas Day table. So, so good and pretty. So we're going to start off with our dry ingredients. To my bowl here, I'm going to add 2 cups of flour. Now, if you don't like cranberries, you can leave the cranberries off and just make a pumpkin bread. But I love putting the cranberries in this because it just gives it a ton more flavor, and you have that pop of tart from that cranberry. It's so good. So to my flour, I'm going to add some baking soda. And this is just going to help it rise and stay tender. And some baking powder, which is also going to help it rise and stay kind of fluffy, I guess you could say. And now we're going to add in some cinnamon, about 2 teaspoons, and some cardamom. The flavor that this gives this pumpkin bread is just delicious. So we're going to add in some cardamom. Gives it a really good warm flavor that pairs really well with that cinnamon. Now we're just going to grate in some nutmeg. If you don't have whole nutmeg, do about 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. And some salt, about a teaspoon of salt. Now I use kosher salt, and I say this all the time. In baked goods, you want to add salt because it brings out the flavors, the spices. And I use kosher salt, so it's going to be a teaspoon of salt. But if you're using table salt or fine salt, half the measurement, because you don't want it to be too salty. That would not be good at all. It will definitely pucker your lips up if you bite into it. So now we're just going to mix this together until it's really well combined. All of those spices mixed well into that flour. All right, now I'm going to set this aside and we'll work on our wet ingredients. All right, so for our wet ingredients, we're going to start off with our sugar. You're going to need about 1.33 cups of sugar. You're going to need 3 eggs, and make sure your eggs are at room temperature so that way they blend in better with the rest of the ingredients. All right, now we're going to add in our oil. I've got a cup of oil, and this is just going to help everything stay nice and, well, I don't want to say it, but moist. It's going to help it stay moist. And now we're going to add in our pumpkin, and I'm using 100% pure pumpkin. Don't grab that pumpkin pie filling. And now we're just going to mix this together until it's all well combined. All right, that is all nice and mixed. I'm just going to clear a space for me to work, and then we'll grab the dry ingredients. All right, so I've got my dry ingredients. My oven is preheated to 350 degrees. I've got my loaf pans over here. They're greased and lined with parchment paper, and that's just going to help it come out easier later. So now all I'm going to do is add my wet ingredients to my dry and just get these all mixed together. Now I'm just going to mix this up, make sure that flour is well combined in with the wet ingredients. You want to stop mixing when all of the dry ingredients are mixed into the wet ingredients. Just make sure you scrape up that bottom. Now, as I was saying earlier, you don't have to add the cranberries to this. You can substitute the cranberries for some sort of nut, like you can do walnuts or pecans, or you can do chocolate chips. I've done white chocolate chips with the cranberries, and that turned out delicious. All right, so that is all mixed together. So I'm just going to level that off, scrape up that bowl, and grab my pans, and I will be right back. So I've got 2 pans here, and I'm going to try to get this in here as evenly as I possibly can. Typically I do this with cups. I will use like a 1 cup measuring cup and kind of do it that way. But I'm just going to eyeball it a little bit today. Now I'm making 2 loaves today. They're going to be fairly small, but you can do this in 1 loaf pan and have a bigger loaf. But seeing as I'm going to be giving 1 to my neighbors, I'm going to keep this fairly small. So I'm just going to kind of level this out in the pan. Okay, so now I've got some cranberries here. Like everything, I keep them frozen in the freezer. And then I just thaw them out when I need them. So I'm just going to kind of drop these on top, and they're going to bake down into that batter, and it's just going to stud that batter just beautifully. Now you can add as much or as little cranberries as you want. Like I said, you can also leave them off and do chocolate chips. Now I'm just going to drizzle over some sugar, about 1 to 2 tablespoons per loaf. So you just want to evenly sprinkle this over the top, and it's going to give it a really nice little crunch on top. But again, you can leave this off. I just like the texture of it. All right, that is what it looks like. And these are going to go in a 350 degree oven between 50 to 60 minutes. It really just depends on how thick you make your loaf. These might take around the 45-minute mark. Just keep an eye on it. And when a toothpick inserted into the center comes out clean, you are good to go. If you have a few little crumbs on there, that's fine. It will continue to cook as it cools. So I'm going to get these in the oven and I'll show you what they look like when they get done. All right, here are the cranberry loaves. I'm just going to let them hang out here for about 10 to 15 minutes in the pan. And then I'm just going to transfer them to a wire rack to cool completely. And then we will slice them up. And I'm going to freeze half of this. I'm going to slice it up and put it in a Ziploc bag and freeze half of this. They thaw beautifully. And then I'm just going to give the other one to a neighbor so they can have some delicious dessert to enjoy. So yeah, I'm just going to let these hang out here and cool down, and then I will show you what they look like when I slice them up. All right, you guys, here is this wonderful pumpkin cranberry loaf. It is so good. You get the tartness from those cherries and the warming, comforting spice with the pumpkin bread. It's just absolutely delicious. But I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to leave me a comment in the comment section down below. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.